Tomoe Gozen, the general and the warrior. In the previous episode, Tomoe proved he was no longer a child playing war. At 12, he killed 40 bandits in an ambush that saved his family. Now, a visitor will arrive who will change not only his life, but the fate of an entire nation. It was the 10th day of the 10th month of Ohotethen, November 1162 by the Western calendars, when Minamoto no Yoshinaka rode through the gates of the Nakahara estate. He was 17, she was 12, and together they would write one of the most tragic and epic love stories in Japanese history. The arrival of the dragon. The sound of hooves came first, the measured rhythm of war horses carrying men accustomed to violence. Then came the voices, curt commands given with natural authority, the metallic clink of armor being adjusted, low-toned conversations between warriors who had seen too much combat for their years. Minamoto no Yoshinaka did not arrive alone. 20 samurai accompanied him, all veterans of the skirmishes that were beginning to erupt across Japan like sparks before a forest fire. They were battle-hardened men, tested in actual combat, bound by loyalty to a leader who, despite his youth, had repeatedly proven he could lead them to victory. Yoshinaka dismounted with a fluid grace that spoke of years on the back of war horses. Tall by Japanese standards, with broad shoulders that promised considerable strength, he moved with the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command. His eyes, dark, intelligent, constantly analyzing potential threats, swept the Nakahara compound with automatic military assessment. "Cousin," he said to Kanehira with a smile that mixed genuine affection and political calculation, "you've grown up." "As you are, Yoshinaka-sama," Kanehira replied with a reverence that acknowledged both family ties and differences in station. "Welcome to our home." But Yoshinaka's eyes had already found something more interesting than familiar pleasantries. In the training yard, a lone figure practiced kata with an intensity that made his own veteran warriors pause to watch. It was a girl, that much he could see, but a girl whose swordsmanship rivaled anything he'd witnessed on a real battlefield. Every move was executed with lethal precision, every transition flowed like water, every strike promised instant death to any real opponent. "Who is she?" he asked, unable to hide his genuine curiosity. "My adopted sister," Kanehira replied, with barely concealed pride. "Tomoe." Yoshinaka watched for a few more moments, his strategic mind automatically calculating how such a skill could be utilized. Competent warriors were rare, exceptional warriors were precious, and exceptional warriors who could operate where men could not. "Introduce us," he said. Meeting of destinations. Tomoe felt eyes on her before she saw who was watching. It was an instinct honed through months of training against multiple opponents, the constant awareness of being evaluated, judged, measured by standards that could determine life or death. He finished the kata with a final movement that left an imaginary blade positioned in the heart of an imaginary opponent, then slowly turned to face his audience. The first thought she had about Yoshinaka was that he looked dangerous. Not in the obvious way men like Kuro look dangerous, through scars and apparent brutality, but in the way natural predators look dangerous even at rest. It was refined, controlled, targeted danger. "Yoshinaka-sama," she said, giving a bow that acknowledged superiority without suggesting submission. "Welcome." "Impressive," he replied, approaching with measured strides. "Kanehira told me you defeated 40 bandits." "I defeated a leader," Tomoe corrected with precision that spoke of an analytical mind. "My teammates defeated the rest. Teamwork, not individual heroism." The correction impressed Yoshinaka more than boasting would have. Many young warriors exaggerated their achievements. She downplayed hers while giving appropriate credit to allies. It was a sign of tactical maturity rare at any age. "Show me," he said, unsheathing his own katana. It was a direct challenge, an immediate test. There was no malice in it, just a seasoned commander's need to assess potential resources. If Tomoe were to join the forces under his command, he needed to know exactly what he could count on. Tavi looked at Kanehira, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Permission granted. "First conditions?" she asked, drawing her own blade. Until first blood, Yoshinaka replied. Or until one of us surrenders. Understood. The duel that followed was unlike anything Tomoe had ever experienced. All his previous fights had been against opponents who underestimated his abilities, who fought in anger or desperation, who allowed emotions to cloud their tactical judgment. Yoshinaka fought like her, coolly, calculatedly, each move testing defenses while protecting her own. It was chess played with sharp steel, each player forcing the other to reveal strategies while keeping secrets of their own. For 5 minutes, neither gained a decisive advantage. Blades clashed in complex patterns, each attack neutralized, each opening closed before it could be exploited. It was a display of pure technique that left the observing samurai in awe. It was Yoshinaka who finally broke the deadlock, not through superior strength or speed, but through experience. A subtle feint created a microscopic opening that he exploited with surgical precision, the tip of his blade stopping millimeters from Tomoe's throat. "Surrender?" he asked, his breathing only slightly quickened. Tomoe looked at the blade near his throat, then into the eyes of the man holding it. He saw approval there, not condescension, not surprise, but genuine recognition of exceptional skill. "Surrender," she agreed. Yoshinaka lowered his sword and extended his right hand. "Welcome to the Minamoto forces." When she accepted his offered hand, they both felt something neither was prepared to feel. It wasn't just mutual recognition of martial skill or respect for demonstrated competence. It was a deeper, more dangerous connection. It was the beginning of something that would change both of their lives forever. War lessons. In the weeks following Yoshinaka's arrival, the Nakahara estate transformed into a military training ground of an intensity rivaling the best in Japan. Yoshinaka had decided to use the complex as a temporary base while planning future operations, and his presence brought dramatic changes to daily routines. For Tomoe, these changes represented a fundamental evolution in her martial education. Where she had previously trained primarily as an individual warrior, she was now learning the art of war on a grand scale, how to coordinate multiple units, how to use terrain to maximum advantage, how to read the battlefield in real time, and how to adapt tactics to changing conditions. "Individual warfare is an art," Yoshinaka explained during one of his evening educational sessions. "Military warfare is a science. I have mastered the first. I need you to master the second." He had constructed an elaborate sand table that reproduced the region's topography in meticulous detail. Using small wooden figures representing different types of troops, he demonstrated how smaller forces could defeat larger armies through superior positioning and perfect timing. "Here," he said, moving cavalry through the narrow valley, "speed is more important than numbers, but here, the figures moved into open ground. Formation determines survival." Tomoe absorbed each lesson with an intensity that impressed even Yoshinaka. She didn't just grasp complex tactical concepts, she expanded on them, suggested modifications that improved existing strategies, and asked questions that forced him to reconsider fundamental assumptions. "If the enemy expects a frontal attack," she asked during a discussion on castle sieges, "why not create a false frontal attack while the real force infiltrates the rear defenses?" "Because that would require perfect coordination between two separate forces," he replied, "and perfect communication under combat pressure." "What if one of the forces was small enough to operate independently?" she pressed. "Say 5 or 6 specialized warriors who could cause internal chaos while the main force maintains its attention on the walls." It was exactly the kind of lateral thinking that separated competent commanders from genius ones. Yoshinaka realized he was talking not just to a talented warrior, but to a strategic mind that could rival Japan's finest. Even more dangerous, he was discovering that he enjoyed these conversations as much as, if not more than, any other activity. Tomoe challenged his ideas, forced him to defend positions, offered perspectives he'd never considered. It was intellectual stimulation of a kind he rarely encountered, especially from someone who could also fight as a demon. "You are dangerous," he said one night after a particularly intense session on military logistics. "What do you mean?" she asked, genuinely curious. "You make me question things I've always accepted as truth," he replied, "and people who do that tend to change the world." It was a conversation that was becoming dangerously intimate for both commander and subordinate, but neither seemed inclined to stop, because they were both discovering something neither had expected. Not just mutual respect or physical attraction, but genuine intellectual compatibility. A mind that challenged mind, ambition that recognized ambition, vision that expanded vision. It was the basis for a partnership that could conquer empires. It was also the basis for a tragedy that could destroy both. First mission. The opportunity to test theories in real combat arrived sooner than anyone expected. Messengers brought news that Taira forces were moving through the neighboring province, burning villages and forcing the local population to choose between submission or death. 50 samurai, reported the spy who had observed the enemy force. Well-armed, well-organized, commanded by Taira no Tadanori, they expect minimal resistance. Yoshinaka studied the reports thoughtfully. His own forces numbered only 30 men, a significant numerical disadvantage against capable opponents. A frontal attack would be suicide. Passive defense would allow them to destroy the entire region before departing. Recommendations, he asked his commanders. The suggestions were predictable. Wait for reinforcements, evacuate civilians, avoid direct confrontation until the odds improved. It was sound advice from experienced men who understood the practical realities of war. That's when Tomoe spoke. "Or we could use the strategy we discussed," she said. "Diversionary attack combined with small force infiltration." Yoshinaka looked at her with an expression that mixed admiration and concern. "You're suggesting I run the diversion while you lead the infiltration?" "I'm suggesting we use every resource as efficiently as possible," she replied. "You have the authority to command men in open battle. I have the skills for operations that require stealth and speed." It was impeccable military logic delivered with a confidence that dared anyone to question it, but it was also a proposal that would put a 12-year-old girl in command of a mission where failure would mean death not only for her, but for men 3 times her age. "The risks," Kanehira began. "They're smaller than the alternative risks," Tomoe interrupted. "If we don't act, they'll massacre hundreds of civilians and leave strengthened. If we act poorly, we lose the battle but save lives. If we act well, we eliminate the threat and demonstrate that the Minamoto forces cannot be ignored." It was a coolly presented cost-benefit analysis that impressed even veteran commanders. She was thinking not just tactically, but strategically, considering political implications beyond immediate military objectives. Yoshinaka made his decision. 5 men, he said. "You choose the team. The objective is to infiltrate the enemy camp and cause as much chaos as possible while the main force attacks head-on. When the signal is given, everyone retreats to a pre-established regroup point." "Understood." "And Tomo?" He paused, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made everyone else in the room feel like intruders. "Come back alive. That's a direct order." "Hi, Yoshinaka-sama." But they both knew that some orders were easier to give than to obey, and that the coming battle would test not only Tomo's tactical skills, but the limits of his luck. Because in real war, competence was not always enough to guarantee survival. Battle Eve. The night before the battle, Tomo found herself unable to sleep. It wasn't nerves. She had moved beyond such simple emotions months ago when she killed her first man. It was something more complex, anticipation mixed with a strange sense of inevitability, as if events were aligning according to a destiny that had been written long before her birth. She found Yoshinaka in the garden, sitting in silent meditation before a small, familiar shrine. He didn't hear her approach, a testament to his own skill at silent movement, but he spoke without opening his eyes. "Can't sleep either." "Active minds seldom rest easily," she replied, sitting beside him at a distance that was both respectful and intimate. They remained silent for several minutes, each lost in thoughts they could not or did not dare share. It was a comfortable companionship between 2 people who had discovered they understood each other in ways that surprised them both. "Are you afraid?" he asked finally. "Of dying?" "No." His answer came without hesitation. of failing, of causing the unnecessary deaths of men who trust me, of not living up to the expectations you placed on me. That worries me. True leadership, he said, always carries this weight. The day you stop caring about the lives under your command is the day you become a bad leader. And you, are you afraid? Yoshinaka considered the question with an honesty he rarely allowed himself. Of many things. Of making bad decisions that cost lives. Of not being worthy of the trust men place in me. Of... He paused as if considering whether to continue. Of what? Of discovering that I care more about certain lives than I should, he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made the air between them feel charged with electricity. It was a dangerous admission, a confession of feelings that a military commander shouldn't have subordinate to, especially one 5 years his junior. But it was also an honesty that created a deeper intimacy than anything physical could. Yoshinaka-sama, tomorrow you risk your life based on strategies we've developed together, he said. I think we can dispense with excessive formalities, at least for tonight. Yoshinaka, she repeated, trying out how her name sounded without honorifics. Tomorrow we fight. Today we are just two people who understand each other. Just... The smile that passed between them held a promise of a future neither dared name, but both recognized. It was a moment of pure connection, two souls recognizing a kinship that transcended age, social standing, or any barriers society might impose. It was also the last moment of peace they would share for a long time. In the next episode of Tomoe Gozen, Tomoe's first command mission pits her against impossible odds, as Taira forces discover they have dramatically underestimated both their enemy and their own vulnerabilities. But victory in battle may come at a price neither is prepared to pay.